There we go. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm truly astonished that more than 200 people, the maximum available, had registered to come and hear me talk about the way we use technology to ensure compliance in the construction industry and specifically for personnel compliance. So the content isn't too exciting, but I'm hoping that by the time we get to the end of the presentation, you'll have an appreciation for how construction or how the use of IT in construction can completely support compliance and support competence in construction, and we're going to give you some examples of how we've done that. So quick introduction. This is me. This is a lovely, maybe small amount of photoshopped picture of me. I am the Group Managing Director of the BCTA Group, which is the Building Compliance Testers Association. And I generally look after the following companies. So the biggest and most well-known, as Shanika kindly told us, was ATMA, the Air Tightness Testing and Measurement Association. We look after the vast majority of blower door tests that happen in the UK. Something like 85% of all the testing in the UK comes through us. SITMA, which is actually headlining the CABE Sheffield event here in England in June, I think it is. I'll be speaking at that event and providing a headline address, and you'll get to see a little bit more about how SITMA works through this presentation. We also have the Building Performance Hub. So the Building Performance Hub itself is fundamentally a training facility. So 10,000 square foot facility, and inside that facility, we've quite literally built an entire house, and we use that to provide training. We've also got a sound suite and a ventilation suite. So pretty high-end training facilities so that we can teach the industry in a real-world situation. We also look after ATMA Australia and New Zealand, and that's just ATMA, the other side of the world. So rather than explaining that to everybody, we tend to just say BCTA. The objectives of today, we're going to understand the differences between compliance and competence. It's not a specific slide I have, but compliance and competence are two very different things. Just because somebody is competent doesn't make them compliant. And just because somebody does something that's compliant doesn't make them competent. We're going to understand what compliance in the construction industry means. We're going to run through how IT can be a friend and a foe in construction. So a foe is generally a bad thing. So how it can support us, but how it can infringe us, how it can cause problems. We're going to run through some examples of how ATMA and SITMA use IT and the rules for how they set up their 17024 style certification schemes in very different ways, but to achieve a similar end goal. And I think you'll find that part of the presentation very interesting, because it is really it is interesting how we do just two very different methods of auditing, two very different methods of quality control to achieve the end goal, which is ultimately competence and compliance. And then at the end, we'll have a bit of a discussion on the future of IT and collaboration, how we can start to combine all of the IT that happens from different companies, not just within our group, but within other groups as well, so that we can start to learn and we can start to understand. And I think that's where big data is particularly important. So first of all, what is compliance? Well, I looked at what is compliance, and I spent a while Googling to try and find a really good definition of what is compliance. And the best one I could find was actually from designingbuildings.co.uk, which says that in very general terms, compliance is acting according to an order, warrant, specification, rule, standard, term, condition, or request. For example, regulatory compliance is the process by which organizations ensure they are operating in accordance with the relevant regulations. So compliance testing and compliance is generally doing what you're meant to do. I could have perhaps just said that is doing what you're meant to do, doing what is required of you. Now, importantly, compliance does not mean competence, and competence doesn't mean compliance, and it doesn't mean you're doing something right, because if fundamentally the specification for what you need to do is wrong, but you still follow the rules, you are still compliant, but maybe not competent. So compliance in construction it's been a pretty hot topic in the UK over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, and definitely since the absolute tragedy of the Grenfell Tower fire. In the UK particularly, we've looked at our building regulations in some level of detail, but also the frameworks around what we do. Dame Judith Hackett, who was asked to do the bigger review into the building regulations with a bit of a focus mainly towards fire, came up with the conclusion that outcome-based frameworks must be supported by sufficiently competent people and robust systems of accreditation and enforcement to ensure adequate accountability in the wider framework. What that means, and I think what reading between the lines of what Dame Judith Hackett is trying to really say, is we're not strong enough. We need to be robust. We need to almost take it to being black and white. We need to say it complies or it doesn't. We need to try and take some of the human out of what we do. The trouble with dealing with so many people and in such a complex way is that we're humans. We will make mistakes, but actually we have the tools that right in front of our hands the entire time that can take some of that away. And you'll see how we do some of that a bit later in the presentation. But we do need these robust systems. They need to be strong and they need to work. And we need to not give people extensions where they shouldn't. And we not need to say something is okay just because it maybe sometimes slightly complies. That's not good enough anymore. So compliance in construction, it takes an average of 22 trades to build a house. I know many of you on the call are very much focused on the commercial industry, and potentially it takes a little bit more. But on average, it takes 22 trades to build a house. And on average, a home will see more than 100 individuals do some form of work or inspection on that house before it's handed over, before it's completed, and before it's sold. That's 100 people. How do we know that those 100 people are competent? How do we know? The answer is, in the current climate, we just don't. Some people will take the opportunity and say to me, we have CSCS cards. Does that make people competent? Absolutely not. If I open my drawer here, I have a CSCS card saying that I'm a carpenter. I'm not a carpenter, but it was easy to get one that says I'm a carpenter. The CSCS card process in the UK is currently undergoing a big review, and I know CITB and CSCS have been really making heavy changes to the process in the UK, and I would argue they've both not gone far enough and they've gone too far in what they've done, particularly with the compliance industry. They've stripped the use of cards in the compliance industry, and therefore we don't have them at all, and I think that's wrong. But CSCS cards turning up on site and having some ID card that says you are competent doesn't make you competent. There are certain certification schemes that operate in the UK. Fire doors is the one that comes to mind for me, where you are allowed one person to be competent and the rest are considered mates or people that are linked to that original competent person. So the competent person then oversees other people doing the same job. And while in theory that works when everybody's on the same construction site and that one person, the superintendent, if you like, is able to walk around and make sure it's all done, the reality is it doesn't actually work that way. The reality is what is happening on site is that people are going and installing fire doors and their superintendent isn't even on the construction site, but they're being signed off. And that's not okay. So just because one person's competent doesn't make everybody competent. We also have a bit of I don't know, I appreciate this is coming across a bit negative, but these are the problems. And I think if we're all in the construction industry and we all need to hold our hands up and say, yeah, these are the problems of the construction industry. We also have a not my job attitude. And this is something that we really need to knock out of the construction industry. And a part of this comes from we're paid to do a specific job. The air tightness tester is paid to go and do an air tightness test. They're not paid to support any other trade. The carpenter is paid to do second fix carpentry. They're not paid to support anyone else. So people go on to construction sites to do specific jobs, but when they spot problems, perhaps because they have some experience in other trades, it's not their job. Their job is to do one thing, to get their job done and leave site. And I think that needs to change. We need to have a little wonder about how do we build bridges between the trades to make sure that we can all stop problems before they occur. The other issue we have, and this is something that we've seen within our own certification schemes. I'm going to hold my hand up and be honest. We've seen in our certification schemes where you have company competence. So that's the company are considered competent, but it doesn't mean that individuals are competent. So you can have a company that gets audited once a year in a great level of detail, but the individuals maybe only have a half a day training course and they're sent on their way. That doesn't make them competent. So we definitely do need to start considering how we look at competence and compliance in the construction industry. The construction industry has also worked largely on trust for hundreds of years. And there's this kind of chain that building control or the building inspectors trust that most of the information provided from the contractor is true and genuine. They're provided information, and I really do feel sorry for building control in the UK at the moment. They have a really tough job. It is really not easy to gather all of the information from all of the sources or drag it out of some contractors, and they trust that information is genuine. So they trust that they see a receipt for insulation and they trust that it has gone into the wall. It's not always possible to inspect it going in or going up, or building control very, very rarely will ask for destructive testing to prove that something has gone in, unless there's real good reason to do so. The contractor often trusts that the information provided to them from their subcontractors is genuine. So the subcontractor may be asked to add 200 mil of insulation into the loft or the attic space, but may have only added 100 mil. But they may have declared to the contractor that they added 200 mil. The contractor will generally operate on trust because they won't always have time to provide those inspections. And we keep working our way down the line. The subcontractor trusts that products they use are okay because the architect maybe has specified them, or it could be somebody else. It doesn't have to be the architect. So the subcontractor is asked to add 200 mil of X type of insulation, or potentially the subcontractor has been asked to wrap a building in a certain insulation that might be flammable because somebody has asked them to do it. And the architect trusts that it's okay to wrap a building in certain insulation because the tests from the laboratories are okay. You can see where I'm going with this. Just because everybody else trusts everybody else, one thing can go wrong, and we can find ourselves having real problems. That slide's a bit of a digression from the point of the presentation, but it is important to understand. And I'm trying to get the point across that a lot of this comes from human error. It comes from trust. It doesn't come from data. If we had hard data, we would be able to trust the chain. So Dame Judith Hackett in her final report set out a recommendation that the construction industry should have a golden thread of information and a digital record of what's gone into buildings. And if I were to go to the supermarket and pick up some meat, more often than not, they can trace that back. They can trace the vehicle that the animal was carried in. They can trace the farm it came from, and in many cases now they can trace the specific animal. If we look at the aerospace industry, we know where every single rivet has come from on an aeroplane. We know where each panel was made. We know the composition of every panel. We have nowadays we have digital records of absolutely everything that goes into an aircraft. So that if something goes wrong, we know exactly how many of those aircraft have gone wrong, and we can take steps to replace them. But in the construction industry, we just don't have that. More often than not, if you were to ask a contractor, if you were to ask building control for a list of the products that went into a particular home, we have absolutely no record of that once the building is handed over. It's very, very rare that we can say those are GU10 light bulbs, and those light bulbs came from a specific store, and that store can trace it back to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer can trace it back, so that we can figure that out. And even less so the homeowner. I think of when I brought my home, we moved in. The only information I had was the instructions on how to use the cooker, the instructions on how to use the dishwasher. I didn't even have instructions on how to turn the central heating on. So having any idea of what was put into the home is just non-existent. And I think that's what Dame Judith Hackett was getting to, that we need to have this IT, we need to have this information and a digital record of what has gone into construction, so that we can make improvements, we can make amendments, and we can see when things actually go wrong. We can use IT to our advantage for that. So here's our first presentation. I'm moving back away from products, and I'm going to come back into the testing that ATMA and SITMA do. One is air tightness testing, and SITMA is sound insulation testing. So I'm going to take you back into a testing environment, not a product environment. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But example one, the Air Tightness Testing and Measurement Association, we built a centralized lodgment system, and we use it for many different things. Any IT system you use, you can use in lots of different ways. And we kind of identified these 6 specific kind of requirements or things we wanted to do with the lodgment system. And we had the same 6 requirements for SITMA, but we actually execute them in very different ways. So the first and foremost, a lodgment system for us is just simply, we use it as a CRM, a customer relations management software. So we're able to just simply use the information that we're recording in the ATMA lodgment system to keep a record of our customers, keep a record of their personal data, their details, their email addresses, their phone numbers, any comments or conversations that are held that are of importance. Everything can be uploaded and kept in one centralized place. And that really helps us improve the operational efficiency of the business, and it removes information being stored in multiple places, which risks duplication and therefore errors. So that's not anything new. And most businesses use some form of centralized CRM. A CRM could just be a filofax, a good old fashioned record where you have a central record and you pull the cards and you manually write people's phone numbers like an address book. That is a very simplified version of a CRM. I can almost guarantee that CABE uses one. Most businesses use one. There's various ones that you can buy off the shelf. Salesforce is potentially one of the biggest in the world that a lot of people use. So using an IT system as a customer relations management software is not really anything to shout home about. But what you can start to do is actually use a digital IT system to try and enhance the communication. So both ATMA and SITMA has multiple methods of contacting its members. So we all know, most of us in this forum will be absolutely flooded by emails. We receive hundreds of emails a day, and it almost becomes like a chat room. If you allow it, you can just be flooded. So we set up new ways of communicating with our members. So we can have pop-up messages within the lodgement system for things that might be considered urgent. We can have effectively a notifications process. So we notify people by email or by through the lodgement system that there is a message that they need to read, perhaps something they might need to read within 7 days, not so important. But we can also click a button and we can mass email people, and we can do the old-fashioned way. We can also see their phone numbers and contact them. But what is really good, particularly with the lodgment system, we'll talk about the lodgment system in a little bit, we can actually start to filter that data and contact people that we specifically need to. So if there was something that went wrong in the example I've given in the presentation in North Wales in the last 3 months, we're able to filter by anybody that's done testing in North Wales in the last 3 months and issue a notification to them that they may need to contact us, or they may need to contact a certain building control so that they can have a discussion about whatever the problem is. We can use our centralized lodgment system for data verification and checking. And I've put here, there's 2 types of data verification and checking. This type is actually in advance. So for those of you that don't know what a lodgment system is, a lodgment system is a way of centrally recording and storing information from tests or from various data. So perhaps the most well-known lodgment system is actually when we conduct EPCs, or we turn our SAPs into EPCs, so energy performance certificates. Energy performance certificates are lodged on a centralized database, and we can access them as members of the public to review the data. So a lodgment system is just simply a way of uploading data and downloading data in a centralized database that allows multiple competent people access to lodge that data. So with the Atma system, we actually do a bunch of data verification and checking in advance. So once the testers conduct their testing, they upload their testing files into the Atma lodgement portal. And at this point, the data is thoroughly checked. From the last count, there's over 500 checks that are made at the point of upload. So we check the validity and we compare the files to other data in the system so that we can check whether or not the test is actually compliant. The standards themselves will say you need to have X and Y and Z and A and B and C as required points, and we're able to check that those things have been done. What we're also able to do is compare and check against other data in the system, so we can see very clearly if a test has been copied or a test has looks suspicious or may not be genuine. That does happen. Atma kicks out around 10 people a year from its certification scheme for not being genuine. It's something that we're really, really hot on. If you fake an air test, we will kick you out. And if you suspect anybody, do tell me. So if data is non-compliant, it will actually show. On the certificate, and I've got an example right at the end of my list here. So you can see here, the data itself is highlighted on this point where there are deviations that have been found to be in breach of the Atma technical standards. And what we're able to do before the certificate is released, normally where this section says invalid, this will normally say, it will normally give your air permeability result. So it'll have a number typically between 1 and 10, and that's your result. But we can go as far as saying a test is completely invalid. It's completely in breach of the standards, and therefore Atma will not allow that certificate to be issued. And it's what I like to call our 1%. I'm probably jumping around a little bit in the presentation, but it's our 1%. It's us stopping some information getting into the construction industry that is wrong. So we do the data verification and we check. I've given 3 examples here, some of the basic checks that we do, but there are some of the more complicated checks. So every time somebody submits a test, we're looking, does their equipment have the right calibration? Do they have the minimum pressures? Are the lowest readings greater than the calibration minimum that they need to exceed? Are the fan flow rates exceeding capability? And does data match previous testing? That one's quite important. If you duplicate a test, which is one of the most silly ways of cheating an air test and one of the easiest for us to find. So if you are an air tester on this call, don't do it. Importantly, the role of ATMA is simply to have a register of testers it deems competent to conduct the test, and not that the test is conducted compliantly. That's actually quite important, because our role that's been provided to us by local government as a competent person scheme is just making sure that person is competent. But ATMA goes one step further. So we actually overstep our own boundaries out of principle. And actually, we find ourselves not clashing with building control, but supporting building control, because we block bad certificates from going out and being used for compliance. But we also we have a kind of middle ground that enables us to provide data to building control to say whether or not a certificate needs to be considered for rejection because it doesn't meet the current requirements. So we have this wonderful process. Let's see if I can take a gamble if I'm logged in somewhere. There we go. So we have this wonderful deviations process. Hopefully there's something in there. Here we go. Perfect. So we have this screen up in the office all day, every day. And whenever a certificate comes in to the ATMA system that is either not compliant or has deviations, or something might be wrong. So we have quite a complex algorithm that pulls certificates that we think may be a little bit suspicious. I won't reveal everything on the algorithm, but it has some pretty basic stuff, and it has some pretty complex searches that we run. So what we see here, we look at these certificates and we judge them. But importantly, what you'll see and what you'll notice is that we don't know who the test is. We have no idea who the person is, no idea who the company was. We only see some specific pieces of data. And what you'll pick up is that we can see things like not achieving the full 50 pascals. That's a technical standard requirement. You can see things like temporary sealing. So there's a kitchen extractor not fitted. There is somewhere here, first floor window mechanism bent, so the window is dropped and it can't close. So the window was sealed by tape, with tape for the client to test. So what we were able to do is to look at data and make a bit more of a human decision. And if I go back to my presentation here, we have three main buttons that we can push in that situation. So we can actually see, we can actually say whether something is okay. I mean, if you're doing an air test and it's got a very good result, but it's just a window has been bent or damaged, the classic one is a window gets smashed on site, and they just seal up. You know, the glass is cleared, and the tester just seals up only where the glass is. We'll generally say that's okay, because we have to live in the real world. And what you'll see on the certificate, you can see to the right-hand side of my screen, is that the test results section will come up and we'll put a big green tick on the certificate, even if there's deviations. We'll say that ATMA thinks that's okay, and that allows building control to look at our decision and potentially support that decision. They may not. They may say, no, I'm not happy with that. I want it retested. But we as the industry professionals are able to give that advice and support. With what we can do some other things. We can actually click a button that we call failed, but it isn't really failed, which is where we will audit the certificate. And what we'll actually do is suggest to the building control that it's rejected and a retest is conducted. And that doesn't mean the building control has to reject the certificate. It just means that the ATMA recommendation is that it's rejected. And the final one we have is when it's truly rejected. And that's the one I showed you on the screen just then, which is we quite literally show it as invalid. So the other thing we do is that we try and support building control and use a clever IT system and get rid of rogue certificates. So it's very easy for somebody to create an airtightness test certificate and just say and submit that information. Just like the chain I spoke to earlier, there's a chain of trust. We trust that the information is okay. We don't always check, we trust. An air testing certificate is very easy to create. You just need to put some numbers on a page and make it look slightly genuine. So one of the things we actually do is And here's that example again with the invalid tick. One of the things we actually do is we pop a QR code onto the certificate. If you're building control and you're on this call and you see an air test certificate that does not have a QR code on it and has an ATMA logo, it is not genuine. It just isn't, unless it was done 3 years ago. So the QR code, anybody could scan that right now, and what you'll see is an exact replica of that certificate, and you'll also see some of the data. Now, you can't fake that. Unless you hack our database, you cannot fake that. And this is one of the best ways of the tester, the competent person scheme or the certification scheme, and building control working together so that we can have a genuine and true certificate that's issued and can be checked without any interference. Previously, when there was paper records, we could do that because it used to be a paper record. But once we got into the middle ground in the last kind of 10 years of issuing PDFs, it's very easy to just edit a PDF and change the numbers. And I'm sure that happens a lot more than people think in a lot of industries. Whereas now the QR code stops that happening. Even if the numbers are changed, you can't change the numbers on our database. So that is a great way of using IT. And I could see this being a great thing in the future for electricians. Is a great example. An electrician goes and does the first fix, second fix, and signs everything off. They should submit a certificate to a centralized system that has a QR code so that it can be seen as true and genuine, and the certificate can't be doctored in any way. And therefore, building control should have a wonderful example of that certificate. So we cut out the middleman effectively. So we perhaps have mostly benefited from our IT system by developing a very slick auditing system. And I'll actually show you that now because we're particularly proud of this. If I move over to this section here, this section here. So these are the current audits that have been undertaken just now, and we can see them at various stages. We can see that audits have been complete. We can see that audits are overdue. We can see audits where the documents have been submitted. And what we actually do very, very cleverly is that we send the testers a link. So we're able to see, we send this link to them and they just simply upload the data. Now, what's really great is that if the tester has uploaded everything into lodgment correctly, we can actually pre-complete that audit for them. So if the file has been uploaded, the envelope area has been uploaded, the calibration is all up to date and all matches, the tester doesn't actually need to do anything. Our system will rifle through the databases, find the correct information, and then we put that to the auditor. The system will email them multiple times to remind them if their audit is overdue. And this is where I say about the IT can be both a friend and a foe, because after 30 days, if you do not respond to the audit request within 30 days, your system will be turned off. You are unable to lodge your tests. You're quite literally blocked. And it's very inhuman. So it's a good thing because actually it keeps people really strict, really honest, slightly scared so that they get the information uploaded quickly, but it doesn't always take into account the humanness. So that person might be self-employed, but also might be unwell. And then we're pinging them emails to say, you need to comply, and they're not at work, they're off sick, and we start suspending them. And that has requirements or that creates problems for that person. So IT can be a real benefit, but also it can be a real negative. So we use that as our way of uploading, or our way of looking at tests that have been done. What we can also, I'm skipping ahead too far. So what we actually do, and the other clever part of our lodgement system is actually this section. So this section is our a program that we created within the Atma lodgment software. And what we can actually do, I'm going to drag here our report audit template, and then I'm going to drag a demo file just over here. We type the certificate number, and it automatically select the auditor. So there's me. So it'll automatically then pull all of the information from that test file. And there's just a couple of bits we'll need to click these yes and no buttons on. Has enough information been provided? Yes. But it will automatically pick out calibration data. It will say whether it feels it's relevant or if it doesn't know. And then we can click these buttons. We will redo the envelope area ourselves so that we can check that the envelope area calculation has been done correctly. And all being well, we click a button and it produces this wonderful report. Excuse me while I make you all feel seasick. It produces this wonderful report automatically so we can see exactly what's going on. You can see here there's a problem that's been identified with the cross, and this one actually, the audit is failed, and that's because there's a major non-compliance, which is that they haven't taken enough data for one of the requirements. So we've used IT in this situation to be super slick, to be super quick, to enable us to audit. We need to audit around 500 people a year every year. So we created the system to be as quick as we possibly could, and to put people in charge of their own destiny, as it were. They upload the data, but we've created a system that allows audits to be done in 5 minutes and to look at hundreds and hundreds of data points, rather than having to manually rifle through every single one. So the centralized lodgment system is a continuous compliance monitoring, and as I said, we will block them. Now, so the way that Atma works is we let them do their testing, and we have that retrospective auditing system. It's very much they test. We do a bunch of checks as they upload, and then we'll do a bunch more checks retrospectively. Whereas our sound testing certification scheme, which I haven't added on here, and our marketing guy will shout at me, but recently achieved its UCAS accreditation in February. It uses a much more upfront and advanced lodgement system. So we pre-check a lot more than we do post-check. So we still have those same 6 goals as I'm showing you on the screen, but we actually do so much more in advance to stop the bad stuff getting into the database in the first place. So in terms of the CRM and in terms of enhancing communication, that stuff is pretty much the same. But the data checking in advance is where SITMA is, and I'm going to be bold. I'm going to shout it. I'm going to say it's one of the most innovative certification schemes in the construction industry. Because what we actually do is we require the testers to declare where they are going in advance of them going. So rather than it being a retrospective thing, we have the ability to quite literally turn up unannounced, which is just an absolute game changer. We do that by financially penalizing people. We all know construction is, construction is all about money, right? Let's be honest. Most of us are in it for the money, and therefore we hit people in their pockets. If you lodge where you're going in advance, your per test lodgement fee is, I think it's £2.60 or something per test. If you don't tell us where you're going, you pay £11 per test. And considering on a typical construction site, you can do anywhere between 4 and 40 tests. Sometimes people will do 100 tests. That's a lot of money. That's a big financial penalty for not complying or not telling us where you're going. We actually very rarely use the unannounced process. We don't normally just turn up to construction sites because it's a terrible use of time. We don't know if that test is going to be on site at 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night. So to sit in a car all day is a pretty desperate measure. So the hard reality is we don't use that as our normal process, but we do require them to tell us where they're going in advance so that we can And ATMA has successfully kicked out 4 people from its certification scheme for various breaches. Now, that's everything from not being where they said they would be, or us turning up and it's somebody else that is turned up that was currently suspended, wasn't able to do testing. But that's also us being able to turn up unannounced and seeing that the equipment they're using isn't the equipment they've declared. So the equipment they have is uncalibrated equipment, and they are selecting on their lodgment system that they're using calibrated equipment. So we're able to use that process to remove people. And that inspiration actually came from our friends in Belgium. So in Belgium, BCCA use a very similar process for their air tightness testers. They have to declare where they're going by text message, and they employ 40, I want to say at the time, the last time I spoke to them, they employed 40 auditors in just Belgium alone. And something crazy like 20% of all the testing that's done over there was witnessed by an independent inspector, which is just crazy. So we use the inspiration from those guys to decide that actually we could make a big difference here. And in my opinion, pretty much every certification and every compliance tester scheme should operate in that manner. So we also have pretty heavy enforcement about equipment, which must be selected. It must have the right calibration. There's a big long document about the right type of equipment. And I guess one of the other things that makes SITMA different is that instead of a lodgment system where we just simply produce a single page report, SITMA actually takes the data in a similar way from ATMA, but we actually take the data directly from the sound level meter. So we worked with various sound level meter manufacturers. We've just actually worked with one of the sound level meter manufacturers, and we're taking data directly from the 4G. So their sound level meters have a 4G SIM card, and the data goes directly from the device into our server. So there can be no ability to influence the test or change or edit the data, or even just the temptation of editing the data, because the data comes from the sound level meter and into the SITMA system. So as always, it must be accurate and complete. We don't ever rely on the manufacturer's declared summary. So in sound testing, we have a big long calculation. There's hundreds and hundreds of data points. And in all of the raw data that we receive, we always have a manufacturer's calculation. There's a couple of manufacturers out there, and I don't know if there are any on the call. There's a couple of manufacturers where the data doesn't actually add up correctly. And that's a problem. And that's happened with thousands of sound tests. So we always use and recalculate the raw data for every single test so that we can be sure, first of all, we have consistency amongst all of our testers. And second of all, that we don't trust that there are mistakes that are added into other people's software. And because we do so much of that upfront auditing, we audit everybody every year. We can do unannounced auditing. We have extreme data control. We do substantially less post-test auditing. So substantially less reactive auditing, because a lot of what we do is proactive. So with ATMA and SITMA, we do the same outcome. We have good level of compliance. We have huge amounts of data checks, but one is very much upfront and stopping and preventative. The other is very much reactive. And you can judge about which of those is better. So there are, let's look at other construction schemes. So the use of IT is set to become very widespread across the construction industry. It's a case of when, not if, right? It's coming, realistically. It's going to come in pretty much any industry that does testing. That's where we're going to start. And then it's already happening at the moment in products. So it's a case of when, not if. And if you're saying IT will never happen, it won't join my industry, it won't become a part, it will. It's coming, believe me. So, it's not just us. That there's a really good system, and I'm in no way linked to these guys, but Fire Doors is part of where I came from in previous employment. But there's a company called Door Data Systems, and they're adding digital door plugs into their fire doors. And what's absolutely incredible about their system, very much like our lodgment system, is that you can walk up to any door and scan it with your phone, and you can tell who installed the door, their competency level, where the door, what the door is made from, what the fundamental components are, which seals need to be used, when the door is due to be inspected, and then you can even see links to photographic evidence of those door gaps. And you can see photographic evidence of what was installed. So if anything changes, you're able to very quickly and easily know what changed. Now, I'm not saying that's going to work in every industry. We're not going to do that for our second fix trim and look at our skirting boards, but it may happen in a slightly different way. I can see very much that the construction industry will have a list of what's gone into buildings and where it's come from, so that we can have that traceability. Potentially electricity. I mentioned this already, but electricity at the moment, very much a paperwork exercise, but it can very easily be turned into a combination of one of those two things, that we can have QR codes that are printed on our distribution units. You could scan those and it take you to a database, so you can see who did it, when it was done, and that QR code can't be manipulated or changed in any way. Now, happens a lot less with electricity, happens a lot less with gas, because these things kill you quite quickly. And that's why we do need to be strict with things like air and sound testing, because they don't kill you quickly, they'll kill you slowly. And when things kill you slowly, people generally aren't that interested in high levels of compliance. So one of the things, and the last thing in the presentation that we're looking at is building passport. So building passport is something that we are very much creating. Let me just open up here. So building passport is a work in progress for us. And the idea of building passport is that we can use information, we can centralize all of our different databases. So we're actively doing this at the moment with air tightness, with sound insulation, with ventilation, with noise from ventilation, and potentially it's very easy for us to add in SAP calculations. It's very easy for us to add in anything else that already has a digital database. And this is kind of the idea, is that building controls will be able to log in, look at a unique reference number, and see all of the information provided in those various databases. So rather than it being provided by digital certificates or PDFs, we'll have a centralized database. And you can see here different examples where plot 1 has had its air tightness certificate done, it's had its sound insulation test done, but hasn't had its SAP or its EPC added. We can further break down and see that there was a bunch of failures under this particular plot. So it failed, had a warning, and then it finally met its requirement. You can click and see certificates if you really need to. Sound insulation, you can see particular certificate numbers and data. And then you'd be able to look at plots that are complete. So you can see, plot 1 has a green tick, plot 2 still has information outstanding, and plot 3 has no information added. So you can see this is very much our work in progress, and something we're doing behind the scenes to combine as many databases as we possibly can internally, and then invite external companies to collaborate with us. We don't see this as something we own. We see this as an industry collaboration. And I think that can be really very much a strong part of how the industry works. And if you're a contractor or if you're building control, imagine how great it is to log in and see that every one of these databases, every one of these bits of information has come from a true and genuine source. And you don't have to do all of the paperwork to store them. We can add a bunch more into here as well. So we can start adding in products. We can add in warranties. So if you install a dishwasher, you can scan the warranty. And the beauty of this is that once the home is built and complete, we'll be able to pass this information over to the homeowner so that they can log in and they can see the types of light bulbs they have, the types of plug sockets they have, the types of appliances they have when those appliances are due for inspection. So this is very much the future of what we're doing. And therefore, as I say, the IT side of it is very much coming. So In conclusion, and I think I've done very well to almost get to an hour and keep 66 of you on the call. The use of IT in construction is coming. It can be used for good, and it's emotionless. It will make decisions without bias, but also without context, and that's important. The use of IT makes traceability much stronger. We know who, when, where, how things were done. The use of IT makes it harder to game the system, which does upset a lot of people. We get a lot of people making calls to us asking if, how they want to change something. They want to remove some information from lists. They want to change test reports because they want to hide some information. Unfortunately, the IT says no. In the next 5 years, we'll see these systems join and align, which will make life easier for building control. And the IT doesn't fix poor workmanship or cheats, but it will help identify anomalies, which can point you in the right direction. So, with that being said, I am more than willing to take questions, and thank you very much for staying on the call and listening.
Okay, thank you, Barry. And thank you everyone who's joined us this morning. Just to remind you that this session has been recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel soon. If you do have any questions, please send them through now. Alternatively, you can email me on webinars@cbuilde.com and I can send them to Barry if you need to. I have one question for you, Barry. Can we have a copy of the presentation? It's been very helpful.
Of course, again, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll send that out. Does anyone else have any questions? Please put them through now. Right. Okay, what I've sent that. Okay. On air test, if the target value is less than the tested air test, will this show a fail?
It will do, yeah. It will show that it's failed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has failed. What it does mean is it's failed to meet the target. The target can change as SAP. A lot of SAPs are done very early in the construction phase. They're often done way before any materials are purchased. So they will change. If you change the the efficiency of your solar panel system or change the boiler that was installed, rather than X boiler, it's now Y boiler, then often we call it there's some fat still in the calculation. So just because a test appears as failed, it means it's failed to meet the target, not failed to meet the minimum requirement of building regulations. They're two very different things.
Okay, Mr. Igbert. Okay, I think that's it for now.
Okay, well, people can contact me. They have my email address, I'm sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. More than willing to answer any questions and talk to you about IT or just about air and sound testing in general. You know where we are. So thanks, Shanika, for allowing me to talk.
Thank you. With that, I'll wrap up and thank you again for your time, and we'll hopefully see you all online next month.
Thank you very much.